Hi there, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. In this video, I want to talk with you about a few very common misconceptions about how intuition works. So a lot of people seem to think that intuition is about the third eye here between the eyes. That is like the master intuitive center. And that this is the place to focus on. And if you've got that figured out, you've got like amazing intuition. But in reality, this is very close to and very much interconnected with just your thinking processes. And your intuition is actually very interconnected with your emotions. You could not have good intuition if you do not feel and understand your emotions. But there's this idea out there that intuition somehow transcends the body and has this very disconnected, insightful view into things. But very often when people have that approach to intuition, what they're really doing is just overthinking and they're saying, oh, intuitively I sense, when really they're just thinking it. It's just something that they're thinking and it has very little to do with intuition. So intuition is actually a lot more complicated than just developing a certain part of you or just focusing on something or just opening your third eye, or those are all very simplified understandings of intuition. And often what happens is people who practice intuition that way, they become very focused on figuring out other people and figuring out the world, but they become very disconnected from themselves, because much of what is happening inside of you and much of your own intuition about yourself is communicating with you through your feelings. And it's quite messy. You have to really learn to sit with those feelings and allow them and understand what they're trying to tell you. And if you don't know that, and if you're just here and you're focused here, often what really happens, the processes that take over are just your mind and your ego take over, and they just start kind of dictating the reality that you prefer and the ideas that you prefer. So this is something to be very mindful of, because ideally your intuition is something that can really help you and that can really help direct your life and clarify things and gives you a certain kind of insight and awareness into your life and what you want and how to go about things. But when you try to search for a really simplistic intuitive formula, like just do this thing and you're intuitive, chances are that's your brain, that's your mind piping up trying to be in control. And I see this a lot in the spiritual community and people talking about intuition. Really what they're trying to do is just kind of give more authority to the mind, which we're already taught to give a lot of credence to. So intuition is kind of that part of you that's not necessarily rational, that's not necessarily predictable, that's not necessarily what you thought it would be. And so it's actually very triggering for your mind, for your ego, because a part of you that wants to be in control is going to be surprised by what your intuition tells you. So people who are very much, who feel that their intuition is very much in line with what they're thinking, often what's happening is that it's not really intuition, it's just thought processes given a fancy name. When you really learn to work with your intuition, you will be humbled, you will be confused, you will learn things you didn't think you would learn. There's going to be lots of moments where you're like, what is that about? What does that mean? What is my body trying to tell me? What are my emotions trying to tell me? What is not adding up here? Like, what's going on? And it's not something you can rationally figure out in your head. There are different ways that you need to get clarity on what's going on there. Now, this is really important because if you start to equate your intuition with your thinking, you can get really, really stuck. And so another thing that happens a lot is that people will say, well, if I don't feel it, then it's not happening. If I'm not feeling it, then it's not true. I'm very intuitive, so if I'm not feeling it, it's not there. But your intuition is layered. You do not have intuitive access to all the information about yourself or all the information about the world. You get access on a per day, per week, per month kind of level. So you kind of get what you need to get to the next point, to get to the next step. You don't get everything that you want. You don't get all the answers that you want. Because if you did, you'd just be overwhelmed, right? You'd just be like downloading Wikipedia all day. Like, there's no point. So your intuition is always coming with a lot of mystery as well, a lot of unanswered questions. And so part of learning to work with your intuition is also learning to be in that space of not knowing, and that space of not having all the answers, and that space of saying, okay, there's lots of stuff that I don't know, but here are some few indicators that are popping up that I can work with. So intuition, when you really work with it, it takes you away from arrogance, because you realize things are a lot more complicated than your mind likes to think, right? So people who would think they're super intuitive, but who are actually not, they tend to become very arrogant. They're super sure of themselves about everything. They don't really question where certain insights or ideas came from. They're just like, this is what it is. And that's often the mind taking over. It's often the mind taking control and saying, I want that certainty, and I'm going to call it intuition, because then it just has more authority. I mentioned the layeredness. I mentioned that your intuition is layered. What's happening in your body is layered. Basically, what's happening in the body is that there are all these, it's like rings of a tree, right? You see the outer ring and you see the bark, but you can't see all the way to the center of the tree. And if you wanted to, and this is kind of an icky metaphor because I don't want to think about stripping away layers of a tree, but all right, we're going to go there. So if you wanted to get to the center, you'd have to strip away the bark. You'd have to strip away all the layers of, what is all these rings of the tree to get to the center and see what's there. And, they call it peeling the onion often in spiritual circles. Like you have to peel the onion. But the thing about peeling the onion is you don't know what's in the center until you actually get there. So sometimes you can, once you understand kind of how your subconscious works and all the factors that go into that, which is not like a quick thing I can teach you or show you. There's a lot of elements to that, a lot of years of study that go into that. But once you get a bit of a sense of all the things that go in, there can be moments where you can deduce that there must be something going on inside of you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can feel it, because you might be at the bark level of feeling things, and the thing that's going on that you can deduce is like 5 rings inwards. So you're not going to feel that. You're only going to feel it when you get there, when you get to that point. So this is the interesting thing about intuition. Like you're kind of working in the dark. And so sometimes you really need your analytical abilities to figure out, hey, even though I don't feel it, I do think this is going on with me, or I do think there at least is a reason, there's reason to assume that this is going on with me and that this is something I need to work on, or this is something that will come up for me, right? That's one thing. The other thing is that in our society, we're kind of taught to dissociate from the body. We're kind of taught to just push on and keep going and just, be up here a lot. And that disconnects you from your feelings to the point where you don't really feel them anymore, even if they're there. So that can happen as well. And then the last thing that can happen is you can have sensations in your body, but you don't know what they mean. So even though the information is there, you can't decode it. It's like a language that you can't speak. So these are some reasons why intuition is not as straightforward as it seems. And it's very important to be a little bit careful about making big claims about my intuition says, and I know this for sure. Ultimately, as a human being, you need to have, your analytical mind and your intuition and your emotions and everything working together, because they all have parts of the puzzle. All right, so what just happened there was my phone was doing a little countdown saying I was running out of space. So it was just like 10 seconds, 5 seconds. So I had to suddenly stop. But the big takeaway I want you to get from this is that when intuition starts to sound very, very simple, either from you, for yourself, or from someone on the internet or in a class who is like, oh, intuition is super simple and straightforward and everything is like perfectly aligned, I would like see some red flags there. Like intuition's not so straightforward. It's actually pretty complex, and it's not something that you just kind of figure out once and then you've got this perfect GPS system. It's something that you're also learning from, and as human beings, we are constantly learning how to deal with the world and deal with ourselves and deal with our emotions and deal with the things that we don't know. And your intuition will show you more and more about yourself and more about the world as you're learning new things. So you're always kind of on that edge of that stretchy edge of, oh, I thought I knew stuff intuitively, but now there's all this new stuff, and what does that mean and what is that about? When you're really going with and following your and trusting and developing your intuition, it turns into this kind of bumpy road. And it's a very interesting road and it's very meaningful, but it's definitely not this like super fast straight highway with like perfect signs telling you exactly what's going to happen next. All right, I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much for listening. If you have questions about intuition or you have questions about things that you're feeling, you don't know what it means, you don't know what to do about it, I work with clients on sensitivity, and a lot of that is intuition, as in like, what does this mean? What is this sensitive signal about? What is it that I'm feeling? And is this something that is this just what I am, or is this something that I'm picking up on? Like, what is going on here? Because as a highly sensitive person, you can get overwhelmed quite quickly. And even though highly sensitive people, we have a lot of strengths, our big thing that we trip over is just getting overstimulated. And your intuition can become a huge source of overstimulation when you don't know, what is it that I'm picking up on? What does it mean? What do I do with this, right? All those thoughts you're going to have about that are going to create a lot of stress and a lot of uncertainty. And so that can create overstimulation. And then when you get overstimulated, you're stressed. So then your intuition starts focusing more and more on, like all kinds of things, trying to bring you answers that you then don't understand. You're like, what does this mean? Now I have more strange bits of pieces of information. So there's some rabbit holes and there's some kind of negative loops that we can get into, and there's ways to get out. There's ways to get out for sure. But it's not just a matter of opening your third eye, I guess is what I want to say. The solution is not to buy a course to open your third eye and then everything's clear and simple. Like it's a lot more nuanced, and there are a lot more layers to finding that inner balance and learning to decipher what your intuition is telling you and how that can be helpful and how that can be meaningful. And if you want support with that, I'd love to support you. Set up a clarity call on my website. Thank you so much for listening. Have a really good day. Bye-bye. Oneness and intuition, and then there is the third eye. Oneness and intuition, and then the third eye, third. Just like Henry the Third. Henry the Third assumed the throne when he was only